The Ashen Grace limped into Velvenreach beneath a sky painted in the iron hues of dusk. Her sails, once crisp and eager, now hung in torn strips, salt-stiff and slashed by claw and harpoon. The ship groaned as she reached the docks, her hull pitted and gashed where scaled limbs had torn through timber, and her deck still slick with the mingled blood of crew and corsair. Ropes were cast with little ceremony, and the moorings held her like a wounded beast brought to heel. Silas was the first to be carried off, pale, unconscious, and bundled in soaked linen. His breath was shallow, each rise of his chest a stubborn defiance against whatever god still listened. 2 crewmen bore him between them with grim focus, stepping around charred crates and blood-slicked deckboards. One of them, the younger of the pair, was weeping silently. Dead crew followed next. 6 bodies wrapped in sailcloth were offloaded with reverent hands. The dock workers paused, hats removed, and even the bustle of Velvenreach seemed to hush, as though the very stones of the quay mourned their return. No songs welcomed them, no cheers, only the distant tolling of a harbour bell, slow and mournful, like a dirge rolling across the sea. Althea stood at the gangplank, her voice sharp, clear and without tremor. Orders flew from her lips like arrows loosed from a practiced hand. Secure the wounded. Move the powder stores aft. We'll need to offload by moonrise. Taran, take the manifests and get them to the dock quartermaster. Her sabre hung at her hip, unblooded, but her eyes gleamed with battle, no longer the apprentice commander but a woman tempered in fire. Taran didn't move. He stood near the midmast, eyes glassy and distant, clinging to a blood-slick rope that had long since needed no holding. He stared down at the deck as if the planks themselves whispered of things he couldn't bear to remember. His face was ashen, lips parted like he might speak, but no sound came. Only when Althea barked his name a second time did he flinch and stumble toward the shore, clutching the scrolls to his chest as if they might keep him anchored. Gideon, by contrast, had already descended into the cargo hold, sleeves rolled and jaw set. He moved without pause, loading crates, fetching the wounded, barking at sailors who dared lag in their duties. His motions were quick, efficient, and utterly void of ornament. If the boy felt fear, it had no purchase in his limbs. He worked not to grieve but to endure, and in that endurance found the shape of survival. Vash stood apart, leaning against the port rail, watching the dying light ripple across the harbour waters. His coat was torn, a long slash across his right shoulder still damp with blood, but he did not seem to notice. He did not help, nor did he speak. His eyes roamed the docks, the skyline, the foreign safety of Velvenreach. He had thought returning would bring relief. Instead, it brought only stillness, and in that stillness the slow, cold ache of memory. The Port Authority was already approaching. A trio of figures in green and silver tabards strode down the stone pier, boots echoing in time with the bell's toll. At their head walked a woman of imperious bearing, Captain Innistra Valen, High Marshal of Velvenreach's Dockward Command. Her braid was laced with copper rings, her sword polished, and her face wore the weary scowl of one too long at war. She had the look of someone carved from Riverstone, hard, weathered, and unyielding. "Captain Althea Vielle," she called, voice clipped but not unkind. Althea turned, wiping her hands on her coat, her composure firm but fraying at the edges. "Aye, that's me." "I require you immediately," Innistra said. "The Dockward Council has summoned you. Urgent matters regarding Caspian Vale." Her eyes flicked to the ship, then to the covered bodies being lowered to the quay. "I'll not keep you from tending your dead, but this cannot wait." Althea's breath hitched just for a heartbeat, but she nodded. "Gideon, you have the offload. Taran, the manifests. Vash." She hesitated. He did not meet her gaze. "Stay close." She stepped off the gangplank and followed Innistra into the heart of the city, her boots echoing with every pace. A soldier returned not to cheers but to questions, summoned not by celebration, but by grief. Velvenreach, ever poised between elegance and order, watched in silence. And above the harbour the bells tolled again. The chamber was dimly lit, adorned in Eldorian refinement, moon crystal sconces casting pale, cold light across polished mahogany. Maps of sea routes and wartime dispatches cluttered the walls, and a faint scent of ink and salt hung in the air. Vash stood to Althea's right, arms crossed tightly across his chest, his jaw clenched. Althea stood still, rigid, coiled, her coat still damp with sea spray, boots marking slow drips on the marble floor. Captain Inistra Valen spoke with the detachment of someone who had delivered too many notices of death. Her voice bore the chill of repetition, practiced, yet fraying. "There's no easy way to say this," she began. "The assault on Mistral's End, it succeeded at first. Captain Caspian Viel broke their outer bastion. Gods know how. It was thought impenetrable." She paused, letting the words settle before continuing. "But holding the port, that was always the real fight." Althea frowned. Her voice was measured. "What do you mean?" Inistra exhaled slowly, drawing a leather-bound folder from the satchel at her side. She slid it across the table. "The full details are in the report, but the short of it is this. After breaching the bastion, the fighting didn't stop. They tried to clear the inner quarters, hold key zones, but it became a maze of ambushes and retreats. Every sector they secured was taken back when their backs were turned." She opened the folder, revealing torn maps scrawled with field notes, blood-streaked parchment, and atop it all, a sketched image, tall, robed, masked, wielding a blade that shimmered in crude ink like silver fire. In one of those zones, one they thought was cleared, the enemy struck again, small force, surgical, brutal. Caspian was caught in the fray. She hesitated, then added quietly, "He didn't make it." For a moment no one spoke. Althea's breath caught. Her eyes were fixed on the folder but unfocused, as if staring past it, to something only she could see. Her voice, when it came, was barely audible. "That's not possible." Beside her, Vash leaned forward, face pale, searching the sketch. "Wait! This figure! Who is this?" Inistra looked to the drawing, her expression unreadable. "That's what remains unclear. Every survivor mentioned the same thing. This figure. Moved like smoke, cut through lines like it knew every breath before it was drawn. The name they gave it." She tapped the label beneath the sketch. "The Hollow Saint." Vash's brow creased. "Is that some kind of title?" Inistra's face darkened. "One of the most feared duelists in the war. Some say he's not even a man, just vengeance wearing a mask. White robes, mirrored blade, moves like water, strikes like silence, never fights with an army, never needs one. If he's been sent, it's to end someone." Althea's expression twisted. "No, that's not possible." Inistra met her gaze, steady. "Witnesses say he fought Caspian alone. It was a clean duel, no one else intervened, and no one could stop it." "That's a lie," Althea snapped, her fists clenched at her sides. "My uncle doesn't lose duels. He taught half the Freeblades commanders how to fight. He led them. He wouldn't fall to some phantom story whispered through the ranks like some salt-born bogeyman." "But he did," Inistra said quietly. "We don't have a body, only accounts. Soldiers who watched from the ramparts said the Hollow Saint moved like smoke through their defenses. No alarms, no breach, just appeared. Caspian went out to meet him." Vash spoke slowly, wary. "And you think Caspian was his target?" Inistra gave a short nod. "He's been sighted before. 5 times over the last 2 years. Every time he appears, someone vital dies. Commanders, war callers, strategic minds. Always in contested territory. Always alone. We thought he was a myth, until now." "And no one saw him arrive?" Althea demanded, voice rising. No sentries, no scouts. You're saying this assassin walked into one of the most fortified positions in Reaver territory and just dueled Caspian in the open? Innistra shook her head. Not walked, slipped through like fog. The front lines are calling it a harbinger. They think he's a weapon, some kind of Reaver ghost meant to sever our leadership. Althea's face was storm clouds and fire. No, someone betrayed him. That's the only way. Innistra didn't flinch. Perhaps. Pirates, after all. Althea's fist struck the table sharp as a gunshot. Papers scattered like frightened birds. Or Armada. After Caspian did what you asked him to do. After he bled for your campaign. The goal was Mistral's end, wasn't it? Innistra's tone didn't rise, but her words landed heavy. The goal was to fracture the Reaver front, and Mistral's end was a step, not the summit. That battle was hardly won, Captain Vale. For all we know, it's already retaken and every soul in it dead. That's the cost of this war. Vash shifted beside Althea, trying to read both women at once. Even so, this saint. If he's being whispered about even among the Reavers, maybe they didn't expect him either. Innistra nodded slowly. They didn't. We've intercepted scouts, Reavers that retreat when they hear the name. That kind of fear. It doesn't come from myth alone. But Althea wasn't listening anymore. Her breath came short, her shoulders taut. Rage and grief warred behind her eyes. Then, without another word, she turned on her heel and strode for the door. "Althea, wait!" Vash called, starting to follow. But she was already gone, her boots echoing down the marble corridor like war drums. Behind her the name the Hollow Saint hung in the air, a ghost in its own right. The tide's mercy had never been so quiet. Usually alive with raucous laughter and storm-worn songs, the salt-washed tavern sat now in a heavy hush, the kind born not of peace, but of mourning. Even the hearth-fire burned low, casting flickering shadows across the warped wooden floorboards. The smell of spiced grog hung in the air, but no one was drinking heavily. Not tonight. In the corner alcove, their usual table, sea-facing, half-curtained, with a good view of the harbour, was crowded with silence. Gideon leaned back against the wall, arms crossed over his chest, eyes fixed on the table's centre, where a half-empty tankard sat untouched. Taran poured a measured splash of rum into his own cup, methodical as always, as though routine could quiet the storm in his thoughts. Vash sat on the bench beside him, hunched forward, hands clasped tightly, knuckles pale. Althea was there too, but set apart, not just by space but by presence. She sat at the edge of the bench, gaze distant, spine stiff, saying nothing. Silas was not with them. He lay resting, still fevered and pale, in a healer's ward near the docks. Outside, rain pattered against the shuttered windows, rhythmic and cold. "I still don't believe it," Gideon muttered finally, voice hoarse. "Caspian, dead." Taran didn't look up from his drink. "Whether we believe it or not doesn't change what it means." "What it means," Gideon snapped, "is that half the damn alliance is held together by a ghost." "A ghost who took Mistral's end," Vash said quietly. Taran nodded grimly. "A port buried in the heart of Reaver territory. A suicide mission by any measure. That he even took it, gods, that alone should have been impossible." "For what?" Gideon shook his head. "For some masked wraith to come and cut him down?" Althea said nothing. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes never left the rain-smeared window. Vash's voice lowered. "This hollow saint, if the stories are even half true." "They're true," Gideon said, rubbing a bruise along his jaw, voice lower now. "The saint's all anyone's talking about in the port, fresh off the front, no one saying his name above a whisper, but every mouth's moving." Taran narrowed his eyes. How the hell did someone like that just walk into a command zone? That area was cleared, locked down. Caspian would have made sure of it. Gideon didn't answer immediately. He glanced at Althea, then back at Taran. "Depends on who you ask. I ran into a Meridian runner, nerves shot, fresh out of the triage tents. He said the outposts didn't fall. They turned quiet. No flare, no cries, just nothing. Then the saint was inside the perimeter. Vash crossed his arms. So what, our lines just folded? Doesn't make sense. Gideon's fingers drummed once against the table. There's more. He hesitated. There's talk of fractures in the guild, not just tension, something older, brewing since Starwake. The fallout between Caspian and Kirin wasn't a rumor. It happened, publicly, loudly. Althea blinked as if struck. What? You didn't know? Gideon asked cautiously. She shook her head once sharply. They disagreed before. Strategy, methods. That's nothing new. This was different, Gideon said. It wasn't in some war tent. It happened during the victory celebration at Starwake. Kirin confronted Caspian right there in front of half the fleet, accused him of bending the guild to Meridian's leash. It got loud, ugly. He left before the drinks even ran dry, and some captains went with him. Althea stared at him. No. Kirin wouldn't. He wouldn't turn on Caspian. Taryn's voice cut through, bitter and low. Maybe not with a blade. But if someone was laying the groundwork for a splinter faction, someone with weight and old loyalty. Vash finished the thought. Someone like Kirin. Althea's jaw clenched. You think he let it happen? That he helped it happen? Gideon held her gaze. I think the saint didn't walk through a breach. I think someone opened a door. Vash gave a small nod. If word spreads that Caspian was betrayed, especially by one of our own, then the Pirate Guild splinters, Taryn finished, and the Reavers sweep us back to the drowned ages. The Meridian Armada will pull out if they think we're disunited. They won't risk another front with internal division. And Marwood, Gideon said, he's holding Mistral's end now, but without Caspian there he's a strategist, not a banner. The Guild listened because Caspian was the one holding us together. They followed him, not the Alliance. Another pause. Another heavy silence. Althea's expression remained unreadable. A hand tightened in her lap, but her voice did not join theirs. Vash glanced toward her, then back down at his cup. That duelist, the Hollow Saint. Don't, Gideon warned. Don't make him sound like a hero. I'm saying he didn't just kill Caspian, he outmatched him. That's the part that keeps turning in my head. Do you understand how fast Caspian was? How much he trained us? If this saint took him down, alone in a clean duel, what does that make him? Taryn replied, voice hushed. It makes him a problem. One we don't know how to solve. A shadow fell over the table as a grizzled sailor passed them, offering a respectful nod. Then, from the other side of the room, a voice lifted. An old man, one of the dock wardens draped in sea-grey robes, stood by the hearth raising a weathered cup. To Caspian Vale, he said, a storm of storms. May Thalarath walk him home across the frost of endings. He began to sing then, quiet and raw. In the hush of frost, all things remember, o'er tide and ash, to the slumbering ember. Where stillness reigns and snowflakes fall, Thalarath guides the end of all. Others joined in, soft, reverent, the kind of song that froze time. Vash bowed his head. Taryn stared into his cup. Gideon muttered the words, half prayer, half defiance. But Althea stood. She rose without warning, the scrape of her bench abrupt and jarring. The table fell silent. Even the song faltered. She looked at them, at all of them, and for the first time her mask cracked. He's not dead. Vash blinked. Althea! She stepped forward, voice sharp. He's not. He can't be. Not him. Not Caspian. Taryn tried gently. We all want to believe that... No, you don't believe it. You're already talking about what comes next, about alliances and strategy and fallout. You think this is over? That we sit here and drink to the end of it?" She turned on Gideon. "You're talking about betrayal, like it's fact. Kirin would never do that. Never." Her eyes found Vash last. "And you're measuring the man who killed him. I don't care if he's a ghost, a god, or some bastard born of shadow. I'm not done." She stepped away from the table, hand resting on the hilt of her saber. "I'm sailing to Mistral's End," she said, "and I will find him. Caspian, or the one who killed him." The door to her quarters creaked shut behind her, but the silence inside was heavier than any sea. Althea stood still, boots planted in the center of the cramped space. The walls around her breathed quiet duty, maps pinned with tacks and scraps of twine, a compass swaying gently from its hook, ink-smudged charts spread beneath a low lamp's flicker. Her sword leaned against the table where decisions were made and fates sealed. A half-empty bottle of dark rum waited beside it, as if it, too, bore witness. She poured herself a glass with trembling hands, the glug of the rum loud in the quiet. She drank. It burned. "Good. You're not dead." She wanted to say it aloud, but her voice had deserted her hours ago. Another drink, and the thoughts came. "You never even said goodbye." Caspian had always been larger than life, a storm in flesh, a leader born not from nobility, but from the sea's own wrath. Her uncle, her teacher, the man who took her in when the sea took everything else. Her mother, gentle, cunning, a whisper of song and steel. Her father, Caspian's brother, a pirate lord of the old bloodline, revered, feared, dead. She remembered the storm. She'd only been 8. The deck had split beneath her, the mast torn away by the wrath of wave and wind. Her father shouting orders above the roar, her mother strapping her into a barrel. "The only thing that floats when nothing else does," she'd said with a kiss. Then silence. Then sea. Then Caspian. He hadn't wept at the funeral rites, just stared into the waves like he could find his brother's face in them, but he took her hand after. Not like a father, not like a brother, like something else, like an anchor. And now he was gone. She drank again, slower, bitterer. What happens now? Who led the southern seas now? The pirate guild would be thrown into disarray. Without Caspian, the only unifying voice was silenced. The Meridian Pact would fracture. Too many captains hungered for old independence. Marwood was brilliant but distant. Blackshaw had no patience for diplomacy. Ferrin was too ambitious. And Greymore? Gods knew where he'd gone. They'll turn on each other. She let out a dry, broken laugh. "We'll devour ourselves before the reavers even fire another shot." Her hand trembled as she reached for the glass again, but this time she paused, staring at the liquid stillness. And the hollow saint? A name like a death sentence, a man or thing that moved like smoke and killed like judgment. Caspian had faced monsters, corsairs, reaver chieftains, ghosts in the fog, and worse. And yet this one, this saint, ended him. Alone. Her stomach turned. Was it mercy or execution? A sob escaped her throat before she could catch it. She doubled over, hand clamped against her mouth, chest heaving. Tears slid freely now, silent, shattering. She didn't cry often. Not since the fire that took the house of the Forsaken, not since the first time she'd stood on a deck and felt command settle on her like chainmail. But now, in the flicker of the oil lamp, in the sanctuary of her cabin, she let it come. "I wasn't ready," she whispered, voice hoarse. Not ready to lead alone. Not ready to lose him. Not ready to stare down the truth of war without him at her back. The bottle was nearly empty now. What do I do? The alliance teetered, the seas would fracture, her crew would look to her, and in the heart of Reaver territory, a ghost with a mirrored blade awaited. Am I going to make him pay? She closed her eyes. Gods, yes. But even as she thought it, another voice inside her whispered, "What if you can't?" She shook her head. Another drink, another tear. In the hush of the room, her voice barely broke the silence. "In the hush of frost, all things remember." And she remembered. The morning after. The sun had barely risen when the Ashen Grace stirred with sudden, unnatural purpose. Vash was first to wake, the sharp rhythm of boots overhead pulling him from sleep. He heard the clatter of rigging, sails loosed from their bindings. This wasn't routine. This was intent. He threw on his coat and climbed topside. Althea stood at the helm, wind lifting her coat like a banner. Her hands were steady on the wheel, her face set. She didn't look at him. "What's going on?" he asked, voice hoarse. "We're sailing," she said. Vash blinked. "To where?" Her gaze was already locked on the southwest horizon. The whispering kraken. Footfalls echoed on the deck as Taran and Gideon emerged behind him, boots half-laced, confusion plain on their faces. Even the dockhands mid-turn of a crate had stopped to watch. "The kraken?" Taran repeated, brows knitting. "That's 5 days off route. We just got back. Silas is still down." "I know," Althea said. Her voice was quiet but unyielding. "But we don't have the luxury of waiting, not if what I think is true." Gideon eyed her carefully. "What do you think is true?" Althea stepped from the helm. Her boots rang against the deck as she paced once, gathering the words like weapons. "We lost good men retrieving something Caspian never got the chance to explain. That coffer, it mattered. He built pieces around it, threads I only started seeing after the fact. And now he's gone. Maybe dead, maybe not. But if there's a place in this world where the truth lives beneath all the silence, it's the kraken. And she'll know." Vash hesitated. "She?" Althea turned to him. "Her name is Miria. Caspian's confidant. I never met her, but I know he trusted her more than most. If anyone has the answers he never gave us, it's her." Taran looked unconvinced. "And if we go there and find nothing?" "Then we return with clarity," she said. "We're not chasing ghosts. We're pulling threads before they snap." The crew was gathering now, drawn by the urgency in her voice, the shift in the ship's posture. Some stood with hands half raised in confusion. Others watched in silence. The air smelled of salt, cold iron, and mourning. "You all thought we'd wait for Silas to mend," Althea said, raising her voice to the deck. "That we'd head for Mistral's End when the time came. But the sea doesn't wait. The war doesn't pause. And the man who led us into it, who might still be alive, deserves more than quiet acceptance of his loss." A long silence stretched. Then Gideon, ever the skeptic, stepped forward. "Silas is barely holding on, and every day we delay, the front slips further out of reach. You're steering us away from the fight." Althea met his eyes. "I know." She didn't try to soften it, didn't offer promises she couldn't keep. "But I won't walk into Mistral's End blind, not without knowing what we were carrying or why Caspian kept us in the dark. If there's even a chance that Miria holds the truth, then we go. Because I won't risk all of you on shadows and silence." Her voice lowered, just enough for the wind to catch the edge of it. "I'm asking for trust. One last detour. Then we finish what we started." More silence. Taran rubbed the back of his neck. Vash stood still, unreadable. Then, one by one, heads began to nod. A murmur rippled through the crew. The lines were cast, the sails unfurled. The Ashen Grace turned her bow to the southwest. As the ship slipped from the docks of Velvenreach, leaving behind the half-lit haze of early morning, the city slowly vanished behind mist and memory. No one sang, no one cheered, but they moved. Althea stood at the prow, hands clenched behind her back, eyes fixed on the horizon. She didn't speak again. She didn't need to. The wind had taken her grief and given it a heading, and the crew followed.